because a lot of people say no. I commentated into the dictaphone. It wasn't just boxing. I mean, my heroes were Kenny Dalglish as a footballer, Sammy Lee, the Liverpool players. I looked up to John McEnroe. I loved... who else I love in tennis? I love, oh God, so many. Monica Seles. There's so many tennis players I adored. In cricket, David Gower was my hero. So yeah, Barry McGuigan and Tommy Hearns probably. David Gower at cricket. I loved Jockey Wilson on the hockey. I loved Alex Hurricane Higgins, and then in later life, Ronnie O'Sullivan. I think you can see what the sort of the geniuses I like, the maverick geniuses, the Gowers, so gifted, but then used to sort of get out to weird, why was he, come on. I love the stories. I love the Kenny Dalglish, the magician, and then going on to become a manager. I love following journeys. I think that's the key. I loved following people. And so it was any sport. It didn't matter whether I was going to be a football commentator, a boxing commentator, a tennis commentator. I just wanted to be a sports commentator. And I went to a very academic school. And my sort of peers there were all going to go into the city or into George Osborne was in my year, the former chancellor. So obviously he told me, I said to him one day when we were sitting around, I said, what are you going to do? Because he was talking about politics. He was a very good debater. I said, what are you going to do? What are you going to be? And he goes, I'm going to be prime minister. And I said, oh, wow, that's a pretty big. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to be a sports commentator. I said, I'll tell you what, let's see who gets there first. Yeah. And when I became a sports commentator, I dropped him a note because he'd only made chancellor. He never became prime minister. But no, I mean, look, he obviously did incredibly well in politics. But I didn't want to do that. I remember going around the careers fair at school and thinking, I don't want to go in the army. I don't want to be in medicine. I don't want to be an accountant. I don't want to do any of it. I want to be a sports commentator. How do I do it? And the way I did it was I wrote a lot of letters. I wrote to John Motson. I went to see him for a few minutes. I tried to be around people. I wrote so many letters and got so many rejections, but I had a name on it and I just went to see them for a chat. People were fantastic to me and, they encouraged me. My grandfather's best friend, I don't know if you know horse racing well, but the two great commentators were Peter O'Sullivan on television and Peter Bromley on radio. And I got an early chance to be in Peter Bromley's commentary booth at Ascot. And he had these big field binoculars. And I was fascinated as a sort of 12, 13-year-old boy looking at him and thinking, how does he remember all these horses' names? And he had this sort of color chart and there was, a big sort of field of 30 horses and all this. And I was just mesmerized. Honestly, Sean, I was thinking, how does he do it? And he got these big binoculars and he was going, and they're coming around the final bend. And I used to do this when I was a kid, before my voice had broken. I was really good at the Grand National. I'd be, and Corbière on the far side, and here comes Hello Dandy. And for me, it was all about that excitement. So I was copying him and trying to be like him and in awe of him. And I guess, I just wanted to do it from a young age. And I went to a local newspaper, the Ham and High. I did a few articles from them. I eventually went through university. I realized that acting wasn't going to happen, and it was all about getting into TV. I went after university. I did a time in America. I did university here at Warwick. Every one of the guys there will tell you then all I wanted to be was a sports commentator, and now they tell me now it's that they've done all sorts of things in their careers, but they're like, you did what you wanted to do from day one and you weren't going to stop. And I've never said I'm a good commentator or whatever. I tell you what I do though, Sean. I put so much into it. I love it. I'm passionate. I respect fighters so much. Every one of them that gets in the ring. And look, I found boxing. I worked in news before. I worked at CNN in Washington. I worked at ITN in London. I worked a bit at NBC, and I ended up sort of banging the doors down, getting into Sky Sports, and Vic Wakeling, the head of sports there, and Mark Sharman. They gave me an opportunity to do some voice work. They said, what sport do you like? I said, everything. They said, we've got a space on the boxing team at the moment. I said, that'll do nicely. I love boxing. And that was it. I fell in love with all the fighters. I got Barry McGuigan walked through the door within a few months, and my boss said to me, "Oh, you'll be working with Barry around the country doing previews and working with fighters." And I was thinking, "Oh my God, Barry McGuigan's like my hero." And then someone said, "Oh, and can you call David Gower? We need him in." And I was calling my hero. And still, when I walk past David Gower in a corridor, whether it was at Sky or when I see him at Lord's, when I see Barry McGuigan around the ring, I'm that kid. They're still on my walls. So I'm still a fan. And I think that's what it is. I always wanted to be a commentator. Ian Darke was an amazing mentor to me at Sky. Colin Hart was an amazing mentor to me in the journalistic world. Bob Mee helped me, Glenn McCrory, Jim Watts, so many in those early days at Sky. And I've worked with some phenomenal co-commentators. I had a bit of fun on the darts for a while. I enjoyed commentating on darts, which was great. It was almost like that was my holiday job, and my normal job is boxing, so that was good fun. And I didn't commentate like I really knew darts. I commentated as a fan. So yeah, look, I love it. I've had a go at horse racing. I've had a bit of a go at football, tennis. Look, I'm a boxing commentator, and yeah, I think I know where I love. And when I took time out when I was ill, I didn't know what I was going to come back and do. But I think boxing is a sport that when you're inside it, it grips you. It's unpredictable. It is the Wild West at times, which I think why Dana and Turkey are coming in to try and change certain aspects to it. And it can always change. And we love improvements and investment in boxing. But I think what we do all come back to, and Eddie will say this and Frank will say this, because I've worked with them, Frank for 15 odd years, Eddie for 10 years. You talk to each other on the phone. You want things to happen. He wants his agenda. As a broadcaster, you want yours. But ultimately, you love what you do. And I think by doing boxing commentary, I could commentate. I could work in a sport which was a bit like the theatre, like my love of acting and TV and film. I could work in it where there was always a story going on, and there's always something happening. So 24/7, something's going on. Like something will be going on right now as we're doing this out there, that as soon as we get out, I'm thinking, okay, that's taking a little twist, or, oh my word, I've got to look at, is that fighter going to go there? Or is that show still on? Or there's always something happening. So I think for me as a storyteller and someone passionate about life and passionate about sport, boxing is the answer, because really it's a sport that can go like that. It's a sport of life and death. And unfortunately, I have dealt with the really, really dark side of boxing, the sad side, losing James Murray a year after I started boxing at Sky, and having to go and see his mum and talk to his family about boxing after he sadly passed. Tragic. But I remember his mum sitting there saying boxing saved James from the drug-infested streets of Glasgow. And, he died doing what he loved, and a tragedy. And then Spencer Oliver surviving, and I was really close to him and seeing his build up. And now, 30 odd years later, he's unbelievable. He's everywhere, all around the broadcasting world. And he's not bitter. Neither's Michael Watson bitter. They're not resentful ever. They love the opportunity to do it, and they do it all over again and twice on Sundays. And that is the magic of boxing. And when people say, oh, it does brain damage. Oh, it's dangerous. It should be banned. Oh, there's too many drugs in it, or whatever. I go back and I say, talk to Spencer Oliver, talk to Michael Watson, talk to Nick Blackwell, talk to these guys who have gone through really difficult times, and I'm never brave enough to go into a ring, but I had to deal with cancer. And only after that, Sean, did I really, truly understand what it's like to be at rock bottom, what it's like to maybe the fighters who've lost or who've been injured or something, and they've got to find a way to come back through life, through dealing with mental health, through dealing with a different physical change to them maybe. And I have so much respect, more respect now. I had so much before I had my illness for fighters and for sports people who I love, but since, almost double it. And that's why I will always say I am grateful for every opportunity, and will only do this because of the boxers, because of the brave men and women that get into that squared circle and they do it. It's their life, and they're putting that on the line for our entertainment, for our viewing, for our enjoyment. And wow, it's an unbelievable sport if you look at it like that. And there's so many characters in it, and it is a sport that sort of drags you in. I remember taking one of my daughters to a fight. Both of them, they've all come. My 3 kids have come to watch Katie. We're pretty close to Katie Taylor. So they've all been to watch Katie, but they're not big boxing fans. My